All right, I'm Leonard H. Ehrlich, and I'm very glad to be speaking with you.
How would you like to be addressed? As Dr. Ehrlich? As Professor Ehrlich?
Leonard will do.
Leonard Ehrlich. Leonard, would you care to tell us about your childhood, where you were born, and a little bit about your family and the neighborhood?
All right. I was born in Vienna in April of 1924. I was born at home. And the neighborhood, well, the neighborhood was a part of the 20th district of Vienna, which was not the most populous Jewish district, but it was one of the three most populous Jewish districts in Vienna. Not, however, that part where I was born. I was born near the, not for about a half a mile from the Danube, and the area was called Zwischenbrücken. It was a proletarian neighborhood, and how is it that we wound up, my family wound up in that district? Well, my parents married in Poland, where they were both from, and they came to Vienna in 1920, and as usual, there was no housing to be had, no living quarters to be had in Vienna. Fortunately, an uncle of mine had bought a property right there in Zwischenbrücken, and so my parents were able to have a place to live after all, and in fact they lived there for well over 18 years until they were thrown out from this Jewish property after the Anschluss.
What are your parents' names?
My parents' names were Helene, maiden name Fischgrund, and my father's name was Josef Ehrlich.
Why did they come to Vienna?
Well...
And where did they come from? What village or town?
Well, the village where my mother came from is called Budov. It's not far from a small town that is now well known. It's about 5-6 miles away from Wadowice, where the former pope later on came from. But my grandfather was the only Jew in that little village, and that is where he raised his family. That's where he developed his business.
What was his business?
His business was liquor distribution, tavern, grocery.
What was his name?
His name was, his Hebrew name was Shmuel Yehuda. Shmuel Yehuda. And his secular name was Levi. And there he raised his 14 children, and my mother was the next to last.
So there were 14 Jewish children in this Polish village.
In that Polish village, yes, and my grandfather was very successful, which means that he had some Mitgift, how do you say that?
Dowry.
A dowry to give, and so the Fischgrund girls, there were 10 girls altogether, were very desirable. And needless to say, when they were 18 or 20 at the latest, they married off to who knows where. You know.
But to marry off somebody in a village where there are no Jews, you had to find people in other towns.
Oh yes, look, the Jewish families in that part of Galicia knew each other, right? And as far away as Tarnów, as close by as Bielsko, Bilic, and so on and so forth.
So for your mother, a young man was found, or she found him?
It was a little bit different with my mother and my father. You see, my father was born and raised in Tarnów, and when he was a young man of about 15, 16, well, when he was 14, he left gymnasium. He didn't want an academic career or anything like that. It was very difficult for Jews to get into the University of Lvov, the closest university. Anyway, so he left. He went to commercial college, and when he was about 16 or 17, he decided enough of Tarnów, is going out into the big wide world, and what for a great number of Jews in impoverished areas such as Russia or northern Poland, what for those Jews was America. For the more well-to-do Jews was places like Berlin or Vienna. And my father went to Berlin. My grandfather put 50 gold guilders into his pocket and said to himself, after 3 months, when the money is gone, he's going to come back. He never came back.
Wait a second. This is your father's father. What is his name?
Whose name?
Your father's father.
He's Menachem Mendel.
Okay.
And
what was his business?
His business, he produced soap.
Okay.
He had a soap factory. And he was doing quite well. In any case, my father never came back. He became a fantastic businessman, extremely successful. And when the First World War broke out, in time he was drafted into the Austrian army. And after the First World War, whenever you want to go from one country to another, you needed a passport. You didn't before that time, you see. You understand? And so what does he do? He lost everything in Berlin. What does he do? He went back home to his mother. He was in his 30s now. He realized he had to make a new beginning somewhere. And he, being over 30, he had to start thinking about settling down, see. And so he went to his mother, who lived in a village near where my mother lived, okay? And she lived with her youngest daughter, who had married a man by the name of Richtmann. And this Richtmann had a little tavern business in that town, in Skavce. And he said one time he had to see his supplier in Budzów. My grandfather Shmuley Hede, you see, come with me. Come with me. And he did. And when they were sitting there in the main room, in comes this young 19, 20-year-old kid and brings my father a dish. And the rest is history. Here we are. Okay? Anyway, that's how marriages were.
Yeah. So can I just go back a little bit about Shmuel?
Yeah.
When Shmuel is... Oh, now I'm confused.
That's my grandfather.
No, the father, your father.
My father is Yosef.
Yosef is... He went off with the 50 gold coins in his pocket, and he became successful at what?
As a businessman.
That's selling, buying and selling.
Buying and selling.
Right.
Buying and selling. In time he became, for a while he was an apprentice, and then so on and so forth. Then he learned how to do books, in bookkeeping and so on. In time he got teamed up. He took a job in a department store. And before all too long, he became a head buyer for the most prestigious department, namely Oriental Rugs, you see.
What was the name of the department store?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And as I said, it was
He had a skill.
Was extremely successful there.
But the war changed that.
But the war changed that. He had to leave Berlin. He had to leave Germany. He had to, he was drafted into the Austrian army. And at the end of the war, he had nothing left. Everything that he built up privately in Berlin was lost. I remember in Vienna, he showed me a 1,000 mark note. Okay. That was a tremendous amount of money before the First World War in Germany. Okay. So he had made a lot of money. Okay. But all that was lost. 1,000 marks bought you maybe a roll or a slice of bread after the war.
So he met your mother, and they married. And they moved to Vienna.
And he didn't want to, but you see, my father's father was murdered in 1915. In 1915, the Russian army, the Russian Tsarist army, moved, into Galicia. But they were driven out by the Austrian army. But the retreating Russian soldiers, I don't know how it happened, I don't know why it happened, simply murdered my grandfather. And of course my grandmother could not do the factory, could not do the business, so she moved to her youngest daughter in Skopje, you see. And she wanted very much my father to go back to the family business but my father would have none of that, you see. His sights were on something entirely different, you see. And that's why they went to Vienna. Now, how did they get to Vienna? Well, my mother's father, my mother's brother, one of my mother's brothers, see, my grandfather had 10 girls and 4 sons, you see. The oldest son had settled in Vienna, and my grandfather did not have, Poland was declared independent then, you see, and things hadn't settled down yet in 1919, and they did not know how to, he didn't have any fortune to give as a dowry, but he wanted to test out my father. Okay, my father wanted to go to Vienna, well and good, report to the prospective brother-in-law. Okay, and he worked for a while for my brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law reported back to his father. He's a top if the thing was sealed, the wedding was arranged, but my grandfather died before the wedding. But in Jewish custom, wedding comes before mourning, you see. So within 6 weeks or 3 weeks or something of the death of my grandfather, they married after all. My father went to Vienna ahead, and from my uncle, not that one, but from my uncle who owned the property, we found a place to live, and brought my mother over and everywhere.
How many children did they have?
Who were they?
Your parents.
2, an older sister.
Whose name?
And me.
Her name?
Her name, Leonard. Leah.
Leah.
Yeah.
And where did she end up?
She ended up in Vancouver, Canada, after, let's see, when did she move there? 47, 48, yeah, 48. And she died there 4 years ago.
Okay, let me go back now. Okay, so now this is the neighborhood you were born in?
Yeah,
And that
rough neighborhood.
A rough neighborhood.
A rough neighborhood, yes.
So you want to tell us a little bit, the names of the streets,
the name
schools?
of the street was Passetti Straße. I have no idea who Mr. Passetti was and why he earned having his name on the street. And it was on the approach to one of the important bridges across the Danube. And
the school that you went to?
the school, the first 4 years, that's grammar school in Austria, okay, the 4 years. That was one street up on Leistrasse. It was very nice to be there. I was the only Jew in class.
And how did you know that?
How did I know what?
That you were the only Jew? Did they tell you? How does one know that one is the only Jew? How do you know that? How did a child know that?
I have no idea. I just know that I was the only Jew, and a certain fellow with the name of Tauber, I believe his name was the only Protestant. All the others were Catholic. The first 4 years, the first 3.5 years of school were still under the Viennese socialist regime. And the putsch, it wasn't a putsch really, the socialists and the rebelled at the beginning of 1934 and were defeated by the Christian socialist government. And
Exactly 75 years.
what is it?
Exactly 75.
Exactly
February.
February, this time of February, 75 years ago. After that, they got a new headmaster for that grammar school. I remember what a sweet person the socialist Mr. Herr Gorichal was. Okay. After that, they got a very staid Christian socialist headmaster there. I remember his reddish beard. The government required that at the beginning of every school day, one has to stand up and pray. Okay, so they said the Vater Unser, and that was the Pater Noster,
Our Father.
our Father, our, you know. Anyway, you know the Christian prayer that's based on the Yiskadash.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Was it in Latin?
oh no.
In German.
In German, yeah, in German, and everyone had to stand up, but there were two people in class who did not say anything, much less cross themselves, you see. Okay, that was that Protestant fellow and me.
So that's how you knew.
Well,
By then you knew. Yeah.
I must say the following. The teacher I had, his name was Pop.
Pop?
Pop, P-O-P-P. He was from Sudetenland, from Sudeten. You understand? The German-speaking area, the predominantly German-speaking area of Bohemia. I remember one time we had you know, a question was raised by him, and we had to respond, and two or three people responded it was wrong, and then it was my, you know, and then it came to me, and I gave the right answer, okay? And he called me over. He held me, you know, like this, you know, very close, and talked to the class about the Jews, how good they are, how smart they are, and so on. But, I mean, that was an extraordinary thing to do. How extraordinary, I, of course, didn't realize at that time. But in later years.
What year are we talking?
Huh?
What year was this?
That was that one must have been in the last year. That was probably after the altercation, you know. 1934, spring of 1934, I think it was. Okay. In other words, I realized in later years this was a deliberate counteraction to not just to the rising anti-Semitism over the decades, you know, the late 19th century, the early 20th century, but the anti-Semitism that was given a sort of encouragement by the establishment of the Christian socialist regime in Austria.
Let me take you to something that may seem a little more frivolous, but can you describe your school? Can you describe, did you wear uniforms?
Oh no, we didn't wear uniforms. It was a proletarian area, you know. And
What does that mean? In a different neighborhood, the schools might have required uniforms?
that was in the period after World War One. The people were extremely poor. It was, they didn't have jobs. They had little jobs. They could hardly afford anything, you see. I remember especially, I mean, you talk about uniforms. Some of them came in tatters to school. How could they have afforded
Right.
uniforms?
Meanwhile, was your family poor too? Or were you doing better?
My father came to Vienna in order to have a proper commercial career. And it took 2 or 3 years, but he did find an excellent position. And he was very successful there.
What was he doing?
There were 2 brothers who had a ready-made suit factory, for men, And my father had the job of establishing the line in stores all over Austria. And he did. In all the major towns or cities of Austria, whether it was Klagenfurt or Graz or Innsbruck or Salzburg or whatever, you see, he established that line there. It was very successful. He was so successful that in the 30s, in the late 30s, they were talking about making him a partner. Then, of course, the Anschluss, they were Jewish people. They were Jewish people, the 2 brothers.
Do you know the name of the company?
Kleinert. And one of the descendants of the Kleinerts became very prominent in Israeli politics in recent 2 decades or so.
Mm-hmm. So, was it evident by the way you dressed as a child in school that you were from a more wealthy family than your classmates?
From a more well-to-do family?
Yeah.
Well, yes, I was decently dressed, and for a while I brought an additional lunch for one of the poorest people in the class. It was such a terrible.
How do you remember that happening? Who decided that you would bring an extra lunch? Was that from your mother? Was that from the school? Was that from you?
The teacher, I think, suggested it, and I told my mother.
Now, we haven't talked about Jewish ritual life. Did your family belong to a synagogue, or?
Oh yes, belonged to a synagogue, and know the name of the congregation, but I know where it was. It was on Kaschelgasse near Wallensteinplatz, and you see, the 20th district had its community synagogue on Kluckegasse. Yeah, but my parents wanted to have the Polish rite, you see, so they were very glad when this happened.
Now,
they belonged to that until the synagogue was destroyed on Kristallnacht.
when you say the Polish Rite, do you mean Orthodox?
Yeah, Orthodox, not just Orthodox, but the pronunciation of the Hebrew was in what was known as Eastern Orthodox or Polish Orthodox. You see, in the Polish or Eastern Ashkenaz,
Right.
in distinction from German Ashkenaz.
Right. And
Most other synagogues in Vienna had the pronunciation of German or Ashkenaz.
what did your family go regularly on Shabbat or on holidays?
They went on Shabbat, but not regularly. Needless to say, they went on high holidays, and high holidays were strictly observed in the family.
You kept kosher?
Oh yeah.
So do you remember the shopping street where the butcher might be, the kosher butcher?
Uh,
Do you remember shopping with your mother?
oh yeah. What's the name of the street that leads to Wallensteinplatz from Gaußplatz? Do you know? I have a plan of Vienna, but it would take time to look that up. But I remember the butcher very well, Herr Kirschner, and like a number of Jews from Poland, they had two last names. One simply because their parents or grandparents married before a rabbi and not before they Standesamt,
Civil authority.
the marriage bureau, the official marriage bureau.
So why would you
understand that?
No.
Do you?
No. That's still that way in many countries. But why would you have two last names because of that?
Because they wouldn't recognize the married name.
Because what?
They would not recognize the married name. Let's say if I married Leonard just before a rabbi,
and not before the marriage bureau.
Then I could not have his last name.
So you would be called?
Schwarz, which was my maiden name.
Right.
And he would be called Ehrlich.
Yeah, and then
the children would be Schwarz and not Ehrlich.
Oh.
Yeah, was considered legally illegitimate.
They had a way around this in Austria, in the Austrian lands. The not legally adopted name would be followed by the phrase recte and then your legal name.
So what would that sound like for you, for instance?
For Edith, it would sound like as follows: Ehrlich, recte, Schwarz.
But it would apply to the children also.
Yeah.
So what
right.
would your name be if it were that arrangement?
Oh, I see. My name would be Leonard Fischgrund recte Ehrlich. Excuse me, Ehrlich recte Fischgrund. Recte is the Latin name for
correctly,
rightfully or correctly.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Enough
So after
anthropology.
after the 4 years of elementary school, then what happened?
Well, then I went to the Jewish gymnasium. Look, this is the way the educational system worked in Austria. I think it's still that way. Everyone takes regular grammar school, okay, the 4 years. At 4 years, a decision is made. Either you are smart enough to go to university preparatory school, which is called gymnasium, or you go to the next level of school, which is called Hauptschule, which is called main school, okay? And that only lasts 4 years. But you can extend those 4 years for another 2 years where you learn a trade or something like that, okay? At any rate, the division is made at age 10. And in order to get to the Jewish gymnasium at that time, and which was called Hayes Gymnasium.
Hayes?
Hayes, Shages, Hayes.
Why was it named after
It
Taylor?
was named after the great Rabbi Hayes.
I was going to say.
Yes, the great Rabbi Hayes.
Hayes, I see.
Yeah. He was a very brilliant man and very well loved. Very well loved, and he had very great influence. Incidentally, it was under him when he first came to Vienna right after the First World War to become chief rabbi of Vienna. One of his first acts was to establish that Jewish gymnasium, you see. But he died young, at age 50 or 51 in 1927. And to commemorate him, they renamed the gymnasium Hayes Gymnasium, you see.
I thought it was a gymnasium named after all the tailors.
All what?
Tailors. Hayat is
No.
a tailor.
No. But why would anybody be named Hayes?
Because originally you were a tailor.
Because originally, because somewhere along the line, a girl with the name of Haye had an illegitimate child. So the child was named, she's Hayes.
Oh, you don't think it's from the word Hayat? I think.
No, it's Hayes. Hayes. Look, we have a Professor Hayes here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ask him, he'll tell you. Okay, fine.
Maybe it could be either.
Okay, fine. Now look.
So we were getting. You were about to tell me about how you got into the Jewish gymnasium.
In order to get in, one had to take a qualifying exam. One had to one had to show that one is smart enough to be there. And I did. But, you went to take the exam, and after a few days, all the parents and children who took the exam were called in to hear the results. Okay? And everyone is given 5 points. And for every mistake in your exam, a point is added. And beyond a certain number of points, you're out. I had 5 points. I got in.
Leonard, you must be very proud. Your parents must have been very proud.
Oh, they were. But Edith has an even better story to tell.
Edith, you want to tell us your point story?
Well, it's not that much better. It's just that when they announced my results, it was also 5 points, and they said best achievement of the whole group of
Best
300.
achievement.
Best
the last one.
Yeah.
But they,
That's it.
How many years apart from you?
1 year.
1 year. So you got to know each other in the gymnasium, right?
yeah,
Okay.
we'll tell you later on.
Okay.
If you're interested how we...
Okay. Yes.
Okay, at any rate, the bad thing about this whole thing, about this procedure was that the ones who flunked were told right in front of everyone, okay? And they just had to sneak out with their parents. which was a very uncomfortable thing.
How many points did you have to get in order to fail?
I have no idea. I never reached that high.
Well, I mean, is it like 25 or is it like 85?
No, I think it was about 10 or 15, something.
12.
Oh.
There were 4 parts to the exam, and each part was worth 5 points. And I think figure about 15, after 15 points were out.
Yeah.
So what kind of questions did they ask you?
If a train goes to St. Pölten,
Yeah.
and it takes 1.5 hours to get there, how come the return train takes 90 minutes? Isn't that a question which the sort of question that they ask?
And the answer was?
The answer was it's the same thing. 1.5 hours is 90 minutes.
So it's all trick
You
questions.
flunked.
I flunked. I'm focusing on something else. Well, why is it that they would ask trick questions?
It's not a trick question.
It shows thinking.
That's all. So they're trying to not know amount of knowledge, but the ability of the brain.
Of course,
Okay.
really.
No, that's very interesting.
That's what it's
not.
about.
It's not. It's an intelligence test.
I mean, these
it's
are
not
10-year-old children,
Right.
Yeah,
These are 10-year-old children.
You also had two exams were written, 2 exams were oral, 2 were math, and 2 were German.
And what would the oral ones be?
Telling something about your life, or doing sums in your head, doing simple multiplication or division in your head, and so on.
Let me say something about this gymnasium, the Jewish gymnasium. A gymnasium is a very structured and very earnest thing. Okay, you don't do play teaching there. Many of the staff of the teachers have what in Austria is professorial rank. You address them as professor. And incidentally, one addressed even those who didn't have the official professor rank as professor. Remember, now, but it's a no nonsense thing. You had to work, okay, and from age 10 on. Let me say this: of say 50 people who were admitted at age 10, and who did not drop out because their parents couldn't afford to send to gymnasium anymore or something like that. And that happened a lot too, you see. Usually at most 15 will graduate at age 18. And that's especially at the highest gymnasium of those days, because the professors, the teachers were especially good and well trained. Why? Because, again, it was the rise of anti-Semitism.
So they couldn't teach someplace else.
They couldn't teach someplace else, or they couldn't follow a profession someplace else. And so we had top-notch people, but at the same time they were frustrated having to sit there and teach kids instead of being out there. So It was.
It may not have been the kindest place.
They were not the most considerate pedagogues. You understand?
Was corporal punishment part of the system?
No. Oh, no.
No, like that.
Oh, no. In grammar school, there was a bit of corporate punishment, namely with a stick on the fingers, okay? But very seldom applied, when it really had to. You see, the teachers had something worse than corporal punishment. If you were really bad in class, everyone at the beginning of the year had to bring a little empty copybook to class, which the teacher kept. If you were bad, they wrote in there that, say me, Leonard, misbehaved in class. And one had to take this home and come back with the parent's signature. That was even worse than getting it over with this way. All right, fine. But at any rate, no, they wouldn't think of corporal punishment in the gymnasium, and much less at highest gymnasium.
I forgot to ask you something. In both schools that we're talking about so far, it's boys and girls?
How was it in your grammar school?
Separate.
Separate.
Yeah.
In those days, I remember the grammar school I went to. They had two entrances and two buildings, one for girls, one for boys. So the first 4 years, definitely separation in those days.
In the classroom?
In highest gymnasium, I remember the first year, or the first 2 years of highest gymnasium, we were separate, boys separate and girls separate. But the third year, together. How was your class?
Mixed.
Mixed right away. Okay, fine. In other words, they stopped, near the beginning of my being in college, Cameron, they stopped the separation in the earlier grades. In the later grades, they had it mixed anyway.
And were your teachers of the same gender as the students? Male teachers with male?
No.
Mixed teachers?
Mixed, yeah.
So how far was your walk from school now that you went to the gymnasium? Did you walk to school?
Yes. No, wait a second. Hold it for a moment. Let me think about this a little bit. I sometimes walked. I sometimes took the electric streetcar.
And did the students bring their lunches with them again still?
Yes.
And now you're all with Jewish students. This is the first time you've ever done this.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like for you?
In one way, comfortable. In another way, it was there was a sense of competition which I was really unprepared for. And I don't think it had something to do with the students being all Jewish. It had something to do with the fellow students in the class in which I was in the grammar school.
Did you miss those friends?
Which friends?
The ones from the grammar school that you stopped seeing? Or were they neighborhood
I
kids?
really only had one friend there.
And what was his name?
His name was Ernst Trinks.
Trinks.
Trinks, yes.
Did you keep in touch with him after you went to the
We
gymnasium?
met on the street ever so often, but there was no chance, there was no time to
What
keep it.
did the bright students from your grammar school who were not Jewish, they went to a regular gymnasium?
I was the only one from that class that went to gymnasium.
At all?
At all.
Oh. So that really made you very different.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Nobody from your neighborhood went to gymnasium.
I wouldn't say from my neighborhood, but from that
school.
from that school, from that class, yeah.
That's very interesting. So did you keep in touch with any of them or just Ernst?
I didn't keep in touch with Ernst. We saw each other on the street ever so often. Okay?
Did you ever wonder whatever happened to him?
Yes.
And do you know?
No. Now that there is internet, I looked up Ernst Trinks one time, but there were Ernst Trinks, a number of them, all over Germany, and I didn't find anyone in Austria.
Did you look up anybody else on the internet to find out what they happened to them?
No, I didn't.
Your Professor Pop?
He was not a professor.
Or your teacher Pop?
He was a grammar school teacher. A nice guy, but a grammar school teacher. He was relatively poor, he had a poor salary. He didn't have a great salary, and he was in his 50s. He had 2 daughters, and he lived with his wife on the 5th level of a apartment building in a small 2-3 room apartment, and he made, during the time that I was a pupil in his class, he made a little bit of extra money by giving me violin lessons. I think we paid him a pittance for the lesson. And he walked home, and I would say it was at least a half-hour walk.
But he played the violin.
I didn't play the violin.
No, he did.
He did. It was a good thing for a grammar school teacher to know how to play an instrument, because he had to teach everything: singing, reading, writing, arithmetic, drawing, and who knows what else.
You didn't keep up the violin?
I didn't keep up the violin, no.
I'm interested the fact that you can fill out the story of Mr. Pop.
One more thing, if you want to hear about it.
Yeah.
I sometimes met him. I did not look him up, he didn't look me up, but sometimes we met when he was on the way home from school, and he had to pass Wannsteinplatz, and I had to pass Wannsteinplatz coming from my school in the other direction. I remember a few weeks, it wasn't too long afterwards, it must have been about 5-6 weeks at most, after the Anschluss, probably was in April of 1938, April, perhaps even May, but at any rate, early spring. We met for the first time since the Anschluss. And he said, what's going to happen to you people? You know, he looked around, Aryan talking to a Jew. He was, but he wanted to know. The point is, he had his sights on me. I was going to be the first and the only child that he ever taught who would make it to university. You understand? And I had to tell him, we have to emigrate. And he was so sad. And he walked on, and I walked on.
Was that the last time you saw
The only time we met after the Anschluss, yeah. Last time.
What would have happened to him within 10 years after that? What could you see have happened to a person like him? Knowing all that you know.
He would have retired on a pension, on a government pension, and
he would not have been taken into the war. He was too old?
Oh no, he was born in 1883.
So he was too old for the army.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
So he would have retired.
He would have retired, yes, he if he were fortunate, he would have married his two daughters off in time without too much of an expense. And that's that. Possibly have grandchildren, honestly.
Yeah, well, we have one fellow pupil from the
I'm sorry.
grammar. I were looking for names of your fellow students. So we have Ernst from the grammar school. Now tell us a little bit about your fellow students in the highest gymnasium.
Yeah, you see, after
Who do you remember from there?
decades, the former students of the highest gymnasium somehow found themselves, and we even have an organization, don't we, of former highest gymnasium students, and we are talking about students our age, not older students, not former students who already graduated by the time we came to her, but our age group, that is now in the early 80s, approaching the mid 80s, and then perhaps slightly after mid 80s. And from what we have learned, this cohort was able, in spite of all the obstacles, in spite of all the misfortunes, to take hold of life, make something of themselves, and raise families. And raise families that are Jewish families. When I look at some of the people whom we know about and that we're in touch, it's truly remarkable. I'm not talking about Edith and me, and that's remarkable enough. Okay, it isn't something great that we achieved, but it is something we achieved. That is very, very much above the average. What should I say? And others.
Can you give us names of the people?
Yes.
Not just the ones that you met more recently, but your memories of people and their names from when you were a youngster.
Okay, fine. What is it?
Take a look at the picture that will come to you.
Yeah, well, never mind this picture. But I'll give you a few names, all right? Otto Hutter, Hutter. I don't know how he pronounces his name in Scotland, in England. He became a Regius Professor at the University of Edinburgh. Glasgow. In biology.
And you remember him from the gymnasium?
Yeah.
He was your classmate?
He was a classmate, yeah. There was a Louis Dauber, Dauber, who was one of the top ones in the class. He became an engineer. Do you know what kind of engineer he became? Anyway, he retired to Las Vegas, of all the places, because his family lives there, okay? Moshe Aberbach. Aberbach, yeah. Aberbach, yeah. He was the top student in Hebrew because his father was a melamed, okay? And he was one of the Kindertransport people. And he did something that was absolutely exclusive, okay? Namely, he brought his father out. Someone in the Jewish community where he was living found out that he knows Hebrew well. Someone that was important, okay, and started talking to him. And found out that his father is a melamed, he's a Hebrew teacher. And said, we need someone like that. It never happened before, or elsewhere. All right, Moshe Aberbach in time became a professor of Hebrew literature at Jews College in London, and then at Hebrew College in Baltimore, and then retired to Jerusalem and died 2 years ago. Was it? About 2 years ago, yeah. We saw him just a few weeks before he died last time we were in Jerusalem. I just could go down the list, and it's everyone. I mean, these are the outstanding ones, but even the ones who are not the outstanding, the professorial, the academic ones, you see, they took life. Let me mention someone, okay? Someone who was 1 year older than in a class above me. He was in the music academy in Vienna too. I remember when in my first year of highest gymnasium, they gave a little concert by students of the school, okay, in our class. And I remember this boy with short pants, with a jacket on, fiddling away beautifully, okay. At that point, I gave up trying to learn how to play the violin. Anyway, that little boy made it to England. Relatives went there and took out the two boys. One of them, my classmate, and the other one a year older, the fiddler, you see. When he was 16, and these kinder transport people were 16, the war had broken out, and everyone over 16 was declared an alien and interned on the island of Man, is it? One of the Channel Islands, okay? This fiddler was together with other interned musicians. One of them was named Shidlin, and another one. But anyway, the three of them banded together and started playing together. And then in time, peacetime, they got a fourth one, and it became the famous Amadeus Quartet. Right?
What was his name?
And Brian became the first fiddler, and in fact he organized it, and they played until they got old and retired. After that, this fiddler taught music and so on. He died 3-4 years ago. Yeah, we see his brother whenever we're in Vienna. The brother wasn't so fortunate, but he was all right. I don't remember what profession he took.
He went back to live in Vienna?
He went back to live in Vienna, yeah.
So, do you know a lot of your classmates who did that? No.
I think he's the only one.
So, what we were talking about before was how you and Edith met. But before I get to that, I just want to bring up something that Edith reminded me, and I'd like you to tell me. Mr. Pop, he was your teacher for which grades?
From
which level, what grades did he teach you?
Grammar. What in Vienna was basic school, grammar school, which is from grade 1 to grade 4, and that was from age 6 to age 10.
So you had the same teacher for 4 years?
For 4 years, yes.
That's why you know him so well?
In all subjects.
In all subjects. So that was a very intense relationship.
I think even Jim, except for religion, which at that time was mandatory subject in Austria.
So did a rabbi come in just to teach you?
No. I went to some sort of Hebrew school that the mandatory part consisted of the following: 1 hour a week at a religion school that the Jewish community provided, plus 1 hour of special Shabbat services Saturday afternoon for children, for youngsters.
And the reason you had afternoon is because you had classes on Saturdays, is that correct?
No. The reason it was on Saturday afternoon is because it was for the children. The grown-up, the more mature people went on Saturday morning.
But were you in school on Saturday?
Was I in school on
School
was it 6 days a week? Yeah.
May I just say something? School was from 8 in the morning till 12 for the first 4 grades. After that, most schools had school from 8 until 1. We had school until 2 o'clock because we had the addition of Hebrew and biblical and modern Hebrew.
You mean at the gymnasium we had
Yes. But you
in
had
addition, yeah.
You had 4 hours of school per day for 6 days a week. So after 12 o'clock, you were free.
So
at grammar
yes,
school. Yeah.
So you couldn't have gone to services because you were in school.
Right.
So therefore you had afternoon. Sorry. And did you say earlier, Edith, that children who were Jewish were not allowed to write
That's right.
by the state?
Yes.
That's pretty unusual.
Well, we had to attend school. However, we did not write.
Were special.
We did not have to write, a special dispensation. I want to make sure that we understand this. It was a mandatory 6-day-a-week school schedule. But at the Jewish gymnasium, we didn't have any classes on Saturday. Instead, we had them on Sunday.
Right.
Which was wonderful, to be beaten up on the way.
What do you mean, Edith?
Because the neighborhood kids knew when the Jewish kids were going to school, and they waited for us.
Even the girls?
Mostly boys, but some girls too. Yeah, so we'll try to get out of school as much as possible on Sundays because we were all scared of what would happen to us.
Okay, Leonard, we're back to finding out how you and Edith got together.
Okay, fine. As I mentioned before, it was a very strict school, and to survive, so to say, you had to do your homework every day, all right? In my case, doing homework, my setup at home wasn't very conducive to following that absolutely stringent rule. For the following reasons. Both my parents were busy outside of the house. Neither of the parents had any experience with supervising children to do their homework. It was different in Edith's case. Her mother sat next to her and make sure that she did her homework, and she spent the time just sitting there and making Edith do her homework. Isn't that correct? I had no one, okay? And instead of doing homework earnestly, I took down the classics from my father's library. I read Schiller, and I especially read Goethe, and most especially read the famous stories of animals that this biologist Brame he's unknown in English, but in German, you know, every child wants to have a set of brain, okay? And we had that too. I loved that, and I loved animals generally, you see. So I found a whole lot of things to educate myself instead of doing the homework. Naturally, it showed up when I was called on to recite, or at the end of the school year, right? I didn't do as well as I had the promise to do when I got top-notch entry qualifications. So, the second year of gymnasium is reputed to be the most difficult year. There are, well, I won't go into detail. The subjects in gymnasium are mandatory. They are not chosen by the school administration, but by the government. Okay.
Can you tell us what the subjects are?
The subjects in the first 2 years are Latin, German literature, history, geography, mathematics,
Science?
There were two other mandatory subjects.
Science?
Science.
Oh yes, science and
Music and art.
well, I can't remember any other, but
History.
History.
I mentioned history.
Oh.
I mentioned history. There are other subjects too, which are not mandatory subjects, but it is required that they be taken, namely music, Vienna, you know, and drawing.
Gymnastics?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Gymnastics.
Gymnastics, of course, yes. But they are not major subjects, so to say, all right? And then there's Hebrew and Bible, because it's a Jewish gymnasium. Except for Bible, Hebrew, gymnastics, music, and drawing. All other subjects are major subjects. You flunk one of them, you flunk the whole year. You have to repeat the whole year if you flunk one of them. Well, after the second year, I flunked one of them. I don't remember anymore which. I think it was Latin or
Latin.
She thinks it was Latin. Okay, fine, very good. Latin, okay? The funny thing is, when we got to graduate school and we had to read some texts in Latin, it is I who remembered more Latin than the number one student in class, Edith. See, I sort of picked things up, you see, without studying, without doing the homework, and as I said, I flunked it. I had to repeat the year.
And now
all
you were
over again, and
now
that's
I
got into her class.
Oh.
And that's how I got into her class. That's how we met.
It was meant to be.
I'm sorry?
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Yes. Edith, in her autobiographical writings, in her memoirs, thanks the professors for flunking me.
So this picture that I'm looking at here, I see you're wearing lederhosen.
I'm wearing lederhosen.
And right behind you, a little bit to the side, is Edith.
Let me explain something to you about this picture. This picture was the last class picture. after the Anschluss. After that, the Jewish school was closed, effectively closed, and I wear lederhosen. And, I was quite blonde at that time. I wore lederhosen so that I won't be bothered on this way to school or from school. It didn't work because everybody, after the Nazis came in, everybody had some sort of Nazi organization, and either the party or the youth organization or who knows what. I, of course, didn't wear anything, okay?
Who's this teacher here?
This was Professor Stein. He was German. He wasn't really our homeroom teacher, as we would say in the United States. But he was there at the time when the photographer came, so he went with us.
Can you give us the names of some of your other teachers?
Yes.
In either grade, the first year or the year that you were with Edith, either way.
All right, let me tell you.
Okay.
The first 2 years, the homeroom teacher, my homeroom teacher, was Professor Victor Löwenfeld.
Oh.
You heard of him?
Sure.
You heard of him?
Yeah.
Really?
He came over here. He was an important sociologist, no?
No, he wasn't
Political.
a sociologist.
Political?
No.
Löwenfeld.
He taught the lower grades of...
Yeah.
He taught the lower grades of mathematics, and he taught drawing and art. And let me just say something about him. He emigrated relatively early after the Anschluss, still sometime in 1938. And he died in the late 1950s. And in those 20 years after his emigration, he made a remarkable career. He is world famous as an art pedagogue. He wrote several books. I remember we visited a colleague and his wife one time on the Cape, and we knew that the wife was also a professor of art education at Boston University. And I asked, this is a long shot, but did you ever hear of Professor of Löwenfeld, of Victor Löwenfeld, or as they pronounce it, Lowenfeld, okay? So they said, but this is remarkable. This year I'm on leave on a Lowenfeld fellowship. And she was amazed to find out that we were, as pupils in Vienna, pupils of his in his drawing class.
Do you remember the drawing class?
Oh yes, I remember it well. And at that time, Lowenfeld's career, when he was still a gymnasium teacher in Vienna, before his emigration, was unknown here, and they wanted to know something, okay? So next time we brought some drawings with us to show what we did. Would you like to see?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the first drawings that we did, that he assigned us, was conflagration of fire in the village. Okay, fire in the village. That's what this means here. You see, and
Hold it up straight to you. That's it.
Here it is, okay? And that teacher, Lowenfeld walked around the tables to look at what the students were doing. And I remember he's taking my brush, and see what I did was a lot of pink smoke here, and he made these flames. You see these flame legs here. Of course, the whole thing is very funny to me now, because in those days people still wore nightgowns, and here they are running with their nightgowns all over the landscape. And why someone with nightgown tries to escape flames by going up a tree, I have no idea. But that's what I thought when I was 12 years old. You see. You want to see more?
Yes.
I told you I loved animals.
I think it's remarkable that you still have these drawings.
Huh?
It's remarkable that you still have these drawings.
Yeah, well, I took these drawings along, but I don't know, but I did. At any rate, this colleague at Boston University was absolutely fascinated by the sort of thing that Lowenfeld had the children do. Not all of them did it well, but apparently did it. But he gave us themes to draw. And here's one of them: Adam and Eve being expelled from paradise. You see the animals that I just loved. And you see Eve taking a souvenir, a frond of one kind or another, and how lovingly Adam holds on to her. I was 13 at that time.
That's lovely.
And may I show you one more, which to my mind is the most interesting, most fascinating thing about this experience with Professor Lowenfeld. Shortly, the Angelus happened at the time of Purim, a few days before Purim. And we missed the Purim holiday, of course. The school was closed for a while. When it reopened, we were an entirely different set of people. Okay, we were outcasts. Whereas 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, we were human beings. You see. And as usual, Lowenfeld stood up front on the podium and gave us instructions on how to proceed and what to draw. Okay, and I remember he gave us the assignment on Mordecai pulling the horse on which the disgraced Haman was, or rather the other way around, Haman pulling the horse, guiding the horse on which the elevated Mordecai was. And it was the time before the plebiscite of April 20th, I think it was, yeah. not far from the school, there was the huge railway station that was in disuse and that was used for assemblies or exhibitions. And the Nazi bigwigs came from Berlin to campaign for the plebiscite vote, you see. And on the way to that railway station, Speer, that engineer who worked for Hitler, made a row of Nazi flag bedecked pylons, for the parade of cars of the Nazi bigwigs and so on and so forth. With this as a background, I remember something that Lowenfeld never before did or after. He described what we should do about drawing the scene. And he went like this with his eyes. He flickered with his eyes, you see, as if to give us to understand something that isn't said. And this was the result of this. In my case, that is. Instead of pylons, you see how I have columns here with a Magen David on top and Mordecai in a suit of ermine, even with a crown on top, and the disguised Haman here. I was a little bit crass because I had someone trying to empty a chamber pot in his direction here, and as was at that time absolutely mandatory for me, the inevitable animals here, you see. I'm a little bit upset over the fact that I did not take into consideration that a horse cannot move by lifting both left rear leg and left front leg at one time.
Tell me about these people in the front. Did you just not finish drawing them? These people?
Well, I never finished. Oh no, I never finished drawing it.
They're quite wonderful. I like the ones. Oh, I see. That's the chamber pot up here. I see. And Edith,
Yes.
you had the same teacher for
Yes.
art?
Yes,
Do you remember him?
very well.
Do you want to add a little something about him?
Well, there isn't very much to add really to what Leonard said. He was, now I realize how good a teacher he was because he made us see nature the way it is. He made us open our eyes and look around and see what there is in the world and how to see it.
And your Latin teacher, that Mr. Gabe?
Gabe, G-A-B-E.
Yeah, he was a wonderful teacher.
Huh?
He was a wonderful teacher, but very scary.
And how about some other teachers? Do you want to
What other teachers?
Well, what about Susanne Kahn? You met her in,
Yes, in New York,
in New
yeah,
York. Yeah, she emigrated to New York.
Yeah.
She was a
She taught
biologist,
history, yeah.
and she taught biology at Gymnasium. Whatever happened to her, I don't know.
Well, we met one time at a concert in Carnegie Hall. Leonard was at that time overseas with the army,
You know, I was on the front
Yeah,
line.
and, you know, she said, "Oh, how are you?" And I said, I married Ehrlich. And she was so surprised. And she said, "An intelligent boy, but so naughty."
That's a good reason to marry him. So, Leonard, did you want to highlight any other teachers?
Did I?
Would you like to mention any other teachers?
So quick.
Well, none are as outstanding as the two that I
Bronstein.
mentioned, although I remember a number of them. One of the things that I was very shy when I was a child, and one of the things that made me feel uncomfortable was having to stand up front and reciting. You see, and they did that from first grade on. One of the teachers that I remember, I mean, this is an anecdote, it's not something about an outstanding teacher. One of the things that I remember in first grade was that this geography teacher had me stand up front to recite. And then he walked up and down, lecturing and so on and so forth. And I felt terrible, okay? I felt terrible, okay? And I must have shown it, okay? And I must have shown it sufficiently for some of the fellow pupils to start laughing at me. At that point, Professor Kofler turns around and sees me in this frightful stage, and he got angry at me, came at me, pushed his very round belly into me, which caused an amusement in addition to what was going on there, and started yelling at me. Einer von uns beiden ist ein Idiot. One of us two is an idiot. And I remember clenching my fist and my teeth because I was the one who knew which one of us two was the idiot, you know. And it was something. But we all felt so sorry for this man. He had, we knew that his two children died from diphtheria, and then later when we did our research, we found out that he, together with another teacher of that gymnasium, continued on. Schooling was forbidden for children, but surreptitiously they continued taking care of the few children that remained in Vienna. You know, the Vienna leadership, Jewish leadership, was able to get practically the whole cohort of children and youths out, okay? But a few were left, and those two took care of them. Until they both were sent to Theresienstadt, and then toward the end of Theresienstadt, toward the end of the transports from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz, they were sent to Auschwitz, and they perished. The other one was Professor Kestenbaum, who was a pioneer in the teaching of modern Hebrew, of not the traditional Ashkenazi Hebrew, but of modern Hebrew, And he was an extremely popular teacher.
What was his first name?
Kestenbaum, I don't remember his first name.
And so you and your classmates found out that these two men ended up in Theresienstadt.
Not we and our classmates, but we.
You too.
Because we went, we spent 3 months at the appropriate archive in Jerusalem to go through the papers. The papers are deposited in the Jewish community papers from that period are deposited in Jerusalem, and they occupy the largest shelf space of all the archival material they have, namely 420 meters of shelf space, which is a lot.
A few more subjects. One, I want to find out, so you met in class, but when did you decide that the two of you were going to be a married couple? Was it in Vienna, or was it in America, or wherever? And wait, I'll get you a sense of where I want to cover so that you can figure out how to do it. And how did you get out of Vienna and Europe? You. And, well, let's do that first. And then we want to get to your more recent
All right,
research.
it's a very complicated, I mean...
Make it simpler.
But I'll take care of every point. When we left Vienna, when Edith left Vienna, she was still only 13. She wasn't 14 yet. And people at 13, 14 don't talk about marriage, okay? We were friends. She happened to be a girl, and I happened to be a boy, but we were friends, you see. Marriage didn't enter into the picture at that time. How did we get out? Edith was on one of the Kindertransporte. And she got out in May, was it? In May 1939. At that time, I was at Hakshara. You know what that is? Yeah. At Hakshara, I belonged to the Mizrahi organization, and we had Hakshara training to prepare us as pioneers, agricultural pioneers in Eretz Yisrael. My parents notified me that she's going to be on a transport on a Kindertransport. Well, I was desperate. I had to see her once more, okay? So I went to our leader and I said, I have a toothache. I need to go to Vienna.
Where was the Hakshara?
In the country someplace, what was formerly a big farm, a Jewish farm. It was used for Hakshara training. We had Hakshara training in... there were both the Mizrahi people there, as well as the Hashomer Hatzair, which is a socialist organization, oriented. Well, I made it to Vienna, and we spent a few days together, right? I took the awfully daring step of asking her whether she minds taking a picture with me, okay? And that's the picture. That's the picture. I had just turned 15, you were still 13, I believe, right? And 1 or 2 days later you went on the Kindertransport. which she describes in her memoirs. After this Hakshara experience, I
Wait a second. Who took the picture with them? You or you? Or did you each have a
went to
copy?
photographer. We didn't have a
No, who took it with them?
Who had the
This is
picture?
not a snapshot. We went to a photographer.
So you got 2 copies?
Oh, more than that.
We got 3 copies, okay?
So you took one and you took the other.
And
You sent
no,
me
I
those.
sent her 2, and she sent one of the 2 to her parents, saying, I met a new boyfriend here, and here's a picture. You know, she has that sort of sense of humor. And when I visited her parents, her mother took my hand and slapped it and said, "What are you doing? How come you're doing this without telling me?" And so on. So, anyway, that was her mother. Okay. All right. So, yeah. After I was on Hakshara, I was in Vienna with my parents for a number of months until July, August, at which time I went to another more advanced Hakshara experience with the Mizrahi people. And approximately August 20th, 1939, you know, we are sort of semi-military at that camp. We lined up at 6 o'clock in the morning after we made a bed, after we prayed, and after we got dressed and so on and so forth. At 6 o'clock we lined up, you know, for work. We had about a 12, 14-hour workday, you know. We were under supervision of a black uniformed SS man.
Oh.
We were under supervision of a black uniformed SS man at both of those Hakshara experiences. And we were lined up by our leaders, you see, and once we were lined up, this leader, Friedel, his name was commands Ehrlich, step forward. I stepped forward. We received information that your parents received a appointment at the American consulate for pre-immigration examination. You have to report back to Vienna in 2 days, something like that. That was the end of my experience as a pioneer to build Eretz Yisrael. Yes,
What became of the other people in your group? Do you know?
one moment. I can tell you a little bit about it, okay? That was August 20th, right? I poured to Vienna. And the big news in Vienna was the Moscow-Berlin
Non-aggression.
agreement, which then a week later led to the war in Poland. Needless to say, we didn't know whether we would get out. We would get out. The shipping companies, you know, the German ships were not available. The French ships were not available. The English ships weren't available. And what if we got the visa and don't have a ship, right? More than that, the only ships that were available were the Dutch ships I don't know whether the Italian ships were available, but at any rate, the Dutch ships, okay? But they wouldn't take German currency anymore. Now they're going to take only American currency. So we were, we didn't know what's what. Finally, we wrote to the people. We either wrote or telegraphed to the people who were kind enough to send us an affidavit. They were actually strangers. Which in itself was a very rare thing. And they advanced us the money. Anyway, we got through the examination, we got the visa, and we escaped, and we got the ship. And
Where did you pick up the ship?
in Rotterdam,
How did you get to Rotterdam?
by means of a long journey.
Train.
Train, yeah.
The whole family.
My father, my mother, and I. My sister was in England already, not on a kidney transport, but as a servant. They had a program where women between 18 and 52 were taken as household servants.
Yeah, Ken's aunt had the same thing.
Yeah, I see. At any rate, she was in England.
And meanwhile, Edith, you were in England.
Yeah.
What's the date you're leaving? What date did you leave Vienna?
I think it was November 14th or November 15th.
So the war is broken out.
The war
yeah.
broke out on September 1st. That's
And you're still in
Vienna.
Vienna while the war's going on.
Yeah, right. Now, I know that some of the people who were in Hakshara with us, in those days there were the British did not permit any
Jews from entry.
any Jews from, except possibly for capitalists or something like this. And they had a very limited quota on their schedule. Okay, just so many thousands a year or something for 5 years only, okay? But they didn't fill it, and now that the war broke out, absolutely nothing. So what happened was illegal transports, which were organized in Vienna. They were organized in Vienna for illegal immigrants to Palestine, what was called Palestine at that time, whether from Prague or Bohemia or from Germany proper, but they were organized in Vienna. Some came through, some didn't, and so on and so forth. At any rate, I know that some of them came through on one of the early transports. I know that because I had a communication from some people.
How long were the Hakshara trainings?
1 month. The first one was 1 month. The first one was in Moosbrunn, which was in south of Vienna someplace. The second one was well, I don't remember the name of the town anymore, but it was east in Burgenland, east of Vienna. It was probably about a month. Yeah, it was a month, but I left a few days before the month was up for reasons I explained. The main group of the people who were on Hakshara with me the second time there left on one of the illegal transports down the Danube. They were supposed to go to a harbor in Romania, and from there take an ocean ship to you know. All right. At any rate, the second group was got stuck in Yugoslavia. And the story of that group is told in our book. In our book, as it happens, of the people in that transport, including the group that was my group, got stuck there under terrible, I mean just absolutely terrible conditions. And the whole thing was delayed for reasons I don't need to explain at this point, until Germany invaded Yugoslavia. Okay? The men were taken away first and done away with, exterminated. The women didn't know what happened to the men. The women in time were taken a group of 20 or so once a week to supposedly another camp, but they weren't taken to another camp. When the truck passed, before the truck passed through Belgrade, the chauffeur got off, turned the handle, which diverted the gases, the exhaust gases from the truck into the from the engine into the truck, and by the time they arrived at the pit at the other side of Belgrade, they were all dead, buried, and so on and so forth. And that's what I avoided.
How did you find this out?
Because about 10 years ago, they had a special exhibit in Vienna about the Kladovo group. About the Kladovo, that's the place at which they got stuck in Yugoslavia, okay? At which the ship got stuck and frozen in on the Danube, on the frozen Danube in Yugoslavia. And lo and behold, I found a significant name in there, so I knew what the Kladovo group was. Namely, the woman in question was Susie Melzer, who was a classmate of my sister's at a different gymnasium, but and she was a supervisor of the Hakshara group, of the second Hakshara group, and we were very close. And her brother, who was my age, was a close friend of mine, but he was able to escape through Kindertransport to England. And it was so heartbreaking to read this. It was so heartbreaking to read this, and we have that all in our book. Also the fact that the parents of those two kids, how those two parents, the two parents of their kids perished. It's terrible. Okay.
Okay.
What else do you want to know?
So you arrived in England?
No,
from
I
Holland.
arrived in the United States.
Directly from Rotterdam?
Yeah.
You went right to America?
Yeah, sort of direct.
over there.
Yeah. And how did it happen then? You must have been how old at this point?
I was 15.
What port of entry did you come to?
New York, I mean specifically Hoboken, New York.
And who was there to greet you? Anybody?
A cousin-like relative of my mother's.
And the people who sponsored you?
They were in Chicago.
And did you ever meet them?
Oh yes, of course. A week. We stayed in New York about 6 days, and then we took a Greyhound bus to Chicago.
And who were these people?
These people were people from a tiny village, just a couple of 3 kilometers away from the little village from which my mother came, okay? In other words, they knew the Fishgren family, okay? And they thought very highly of the Fishgren family, and that was our only contact in the United States. People we didn't know, but
Well, how did you
people who were not related.
How did you find them? How did your...
Well,
Do you know?
we didn't know anyone, so my mother finally remembered there were these people in Bienkovka who emigrated right after the First World War. Let's write to them. And she wrote to her sister in Budzov and said, can you tell me how one can get in touch with those people? And I still have the postcard someplace where she said,
So what are their names, these people?
Selinger, Zelinger, Selinger.
And then the first names?
There was an old lady, the mother, and there were 6 children. And they were still on the way up. You understand? They were still on the way up. The oldest one had a farm in Iowa. The second oldest one drove a taxi in order to be able to go through medical school, and in his late 30s he finally got to be a doctor. The third one was a lawyer. The kid brother was 29 at that time, also just made law. And the 2 women, one was a secretary in a grammar school, and the other one was a gym teacher in a high school, okay? The youngest one. So none had enough money to qualify for successful. What they did was to take their money out of their savings account and put it into the savings account of the youngest one, of Regina, okay?
Regina Zellinger.
Regina Zellinger, yeah. And that's how it was.
Did you keep in touch with them through the years?
Oh yeah. Not I personally, but certainly my mother did, yes.
Now we have to get you 2 together again. Because you're sitting as a 16-year-old in America. You have to learn English.
Yeah.
They put you in school in Chicago?
They put me in school in Chicago.
Your father found work? So.
No. It was very difficult. It was very difficult for him to find work.
So what happened?
Finally, he was lent some funds from the Hayas to buy himself and open a newspaper stand at a corner on the west side of Chicago.
It's a job?
It's a job.
Yeah.
It was terrible for
Yes,
him.
it was terrible. I can see
for
that.
him,
Yeah.
And also worked Sunday mornings from 6 to 10. I had a push cart outpost of his newspaper stand in front of a church on Sunday, with the Sunday papers.
That's resourceful.
Yeah. In addition to that, on the corner where he had the newsstand, the proprietor of the drugstore there was kind enough to let him come in ever so often to warm himself in the winter and to use the facilities if need be. And he gave me a job there as a soda, no, not a soda jerk, as a dishwasher. Kids came in for sodas at night. And I had a job there from 8 in the evening until 1 o'clock in the morning. I took a 1 hour ride from where we lived. And to get there and 1 hour back again. In other words, my schedule for those 2 or 3 semesters, I don't remember anymore which, was I went to school from 8 to 11, ate lunch, slept until 5 or 5:30, ate supper, from 2 to 6 I slept. Then I ate supper, and then I took a streetcar ride, worked for 5 hours at the drugstore. 2 o'clock I was home again, slept for 4 hours, and so on.
You did this for about a year and a half.
Yeah, and I got 25 cents per hour.
Now,
I had 7 days a week, plus he gave me streetcar tokens to come to him, okay, plus 14 cents, so to say, streetcar fare.
okay, what was the corner? What streets?
It's on the west side, Kilmer, corner Madison Avenue, I believe. There was a streetcar line to Madison Avenue. Yeah, Madison Avenue was a main street, but on the west side, all the streets are named by K. So
Kilmer.
Kilmer, I believe it was.
So next time I'm in Chicago, I'll take a picture of the corner. Was it the north corner, south corner, east?
It was the southeast corner.
What was the name of the drugstore?
I should know. After
Yes.
all this time, I don't remember.
And the name of the boss?
The name of the boss, I don't remember anymore either. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Where was your father's newsstand located?
On the corner, right
On the
there.
corner.
Oh, you had an outpost. I'm sorry, confused with the outpost. Okay.
And do you remember the church?
The church was about 1.5 blocks away.
What? Was your mother working too?
My mother was working. Her first job was as householder and cleaning lady for a couple that was both high school. They were both high school teachers.
Was this her first actual job?
Her first actual job.
Right.
Jobs. In time, she worked as a seamstress in a clothing. What sort of some kind of clothing factory?
Yeah, she was a sewing machine operator.
She was a
And all of this was in the Chicago area.
in Chicago.
In Chicago,
Yeah.
so.
So here you are 16. How long did it take you to learn English?
I learned English in gymnasium already.
Uh-huh.
All right, I learned English in gymnasium already. I had 1 year of English in gymnasium, 1,000 words vocabulary, but complete grammar. I remember how delighted we were with English because after German, and after Latin.
Speak of that.
It was child's play to learn the English grammar.
Right.
It was child's play. Let me tell you a story. When do you mind?
No.
Okay. In those days, you could start school either at what we call mid-year or at the beginning of the year. So I came to Chicago mid-December or second half of December. What to do with me, okay? Well, high school starts of January, okay? In the meantime, how about sending him to a grammar school? Okay, grammar school. I went to grammar school. The first day, I am put into first grade. And they had tiny little chairs and desks and so on, and those tiny little kids. It was good, and an absolutely beautiful young teacher. Okay, and they brought in a chair for me, and I watched them. It was such a delightful experience. Here they put on a play. A boy was playing a tree. Another boy was playing a little boy with a hatchet, and the third boy was playing a father. And I remember the boy playing the father says, "George, what did you do?" And the boy who was playing with the hatchet says, "Father, I cannot tell a lie," or something like that. And anyway, it was absolutely delightful. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. But needless to say, I was misplaced. And by the end of the day, I was placed into the 8th grade. But not only the 8th grade, but the graduating 8th grade, okay? And just a couple or so weeks before the graduation, a couple or 3 weeks before the graduation, the teacher said, "Look, you kids are going to be in high school soon. You need to know something about English grammar." The kids were absolutely floored. And I, with my 1,000-word vocabulary, was the only one who was able to give answers to the question about English grammar: past, present, future, perfect, future. They had absolutely no inkling as to what this was about. Okay, but anyway, that's that. Okay.
That's a great story.
Is it? Okay, good.
So in January, when the second
that was in
semester started, then they
January,
put you into which grade?
In January, where in
At
high
the end
school?
of
He stayed in 8th grade.
Oh,
No.
at the
In January, they put you into the correct grade, right?
in 8th grade. Yeah,
Eighth
The 8th grade was your correct grade? Not at 16.
I stayed with them for about 4 weeks.
I'm telling you this.
Oh, okay.
What grade did you go into then?
First year high school.
Right. So
In time, I got credit for
all the work.
what I knew.
So were you able to graduate
Yeah.
early?
I was able to graduate at 18. Yeah.
2 years
which
later.
is to say, after 2.5 years.
All right. So now you are
In Chicago.
through high school in Chicago, and you are still in England.
I'm in England, yes.
How did you get to the United States?
My parents managed to get out and finally managed to get me over from England.
So they went from Vienna to the United States, and then they brought you over. And what year was it that they brought you over?
1940, May 1940.
And may I ask how old you were at that point?
I was 14.
Oh, so you only spent a year in
Yes.
England.
Was enough.
And so where were they?
She experienced the Blitz too. Were you in London during the war? No. Where were you?
I left just before the Blitz. It started just after I left.
So where were your parents in America? What city?
In New York City.
So you now become a New Yorker.
Sort of, yes.
Which neighborhood?
I'm sorry?
What neighborhood?
We first lived on 2nd Avenue and about 12th Street.
And so you went to American schools.
Yes.
And did you go into, had you done English also?
Yes.
And you were spent a year in England, so you were really ready.
I was ready. Oh, yeah. I went to school in England, too.
So you were in your proper year?
Yes, I was. Yes, I also graduated at 18. I was almost 18 when I graduated. Yeah.
And what high school did you graduate from?
Gustav Straub Miller Textile High School, which does not exist anymore.
Straubing Miller
Textile.
High School.
Textile.
What does that mean, a textile high school?
They specialized in textile trades, clothing design, pattern design, this kind of thing.
So do you know how to make patterns?
No, I was totally unfitted for it.
I see.
They
So
just
now,
sent me
how are we going to get New York and Chicago together?
by mail.
So you knew where he was.
Oh, yes.
We kept in constant touch with each other.
They kept in touch. Kept in touch.
Did you keep your correspondence?
The letters which I wrote to her in England, she couldn't keep because the British census during wartime did not permit anything in German to leave England.
That was very
All right.
to get rid of all
She
this.
even had to get rid of the 2 books she brought with her from Vienna.
One of them Leonard had given to me, but so it was especially dear to
Well,
me.
that's all right. At any rate, yeah. But everything else we have, I believe, huh?
Yeah,
I certainly have all your letters.
yeah.
And
Someplace in the garage. It's
yeah.
disappointing.
That's
But-
wonderful.
Yeah. yeah.
So, who moved to which city?
Well, he was drafted.
Well-
Oh, you got drafted.
All right, well, let me explain.
she stayed in, Edith stayed in New York,
Yeah.
and I was in Chicago, and we corresponded. We so often sent each other pictures. And after I graduated high school in 1942, I worked in a laundry. You know, in those days people didn't have washing machines. There were some houses, some apartment buildings had washing machines in the basement, but not all. People sent their laundry to the laundry, and it was. I worked for most of the summer in the laundry. It's the worst and the toughest job, but I earned good money. What was then good money? Enough to visit her at the end of the summer in New York. And we spent about 12 days or so together, right?
It was the first time we'd seen each other since 1939, since May of 39. This was August of
Yeah.
42.
Were you still impressed with him?
More than ever.
What's this? What?
Was I still impressed with you?
Begeistert.
Yeah.
And you?
absolutely.
Were you still impressed with her?
Huh?
What did you think when you saw her after all that time?
I appreciate your question, but it moves in the direction of prying.
Oh, in other words, you were very impressed with her. I
I
see.
should leave the room with that.
Yeah, no, I think we should all leave the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I add something here? On Leonard's 16th birthday, he wrote me a long letter to England in which he outlined the fact that he's going to finish college and go to graduate school, get his master's, which you projected, I think, for the year 48, at which point we would get married. That's how I found out.
That's how you found out that you were going to be married to
Yes.
him. I see. Has it been like that ever since?
At any rate, it was very wonderful being together for those few days. And then excuse me, please. Then I started college in September of 42, and in November of that year, President Roosevelt held one of his fireside chats, this time addressed to the mothers of America, telling them that he will have to draft the 18-year-olds into the army, and in February of just at the beginning of the second semester, I received a letter signed by President Roosevelt starting greetings and informing me that I will be drafted. Needless to say, my mother was in consternation, but that's the way it was. I was drafted.
Were you frightened?
I'm sorry?
Were you frightened? Frightened?
Frightened?
Were
Of
you
what?
Of going to war?
Well, I wasn't looking forward to it, but I very strongly felt that this is what isn't it? This has to be done.
Right.
All right, this has to be done.
Right. So you were at which university were you?
University,
You said you started college.
college. Yes,
Where-
I couldn't afford university. I was in a junior college.
Which one was that?
It
Right.
was called Wright,
Wright.
W-R-I-G-H-T, Junior College.
It was free.
I believe
In
now
Chicago?
it is in Chicago, yeah. I believe it later became a 4-year city college, right? City college, okay. But I don't know what happened to it.
So you went off to the army. I want to skip the army for a minute and come back. When you came back, you went back into college.
When I came back, I went back to college, but then
Which one did you get into this?
But then I had
GI Bill.
I'm sorry.
GI Bill?
I had the jail bill available, and also I worked for some, I had jobs. I applied to the University of Chicago. They took me in. I mean, they accepted me. But for next fall, I was discharged in November of 1945. You see. They gave me the exams. I qualified. They said you can come in, but next September. You see, September '46. I couldn't wait that long, so they suggested, why don't you, in the meantime, go to this new college that's downtown, namely Roosevelt College. It was newly founded, but anyway, I don't need to talk about Roosevelt College. We went to. You were also, I believe, accepted for next fall, right? Yeah, at the University of Chicago.
So you applied to the same place. So
Yeah, we applied.
were you already married at this
Oh,
point?
yeah.
So when did you get married? Before the army?
Yes, we got married when I was with a division that was slated to go overseas, and it was at that time in pre-overseas training.
Where were you? Where,
That was in Camp Phillips, Kansas. Okay. And Edith was just finishing her first year of college when she went to take her last final exam. She had her suitcase with her, and from taking the exam, she went to the town bus station in New York to go take her bus to Kansas. She was 67 years, 67 hours on the bus just to go and marry me. Can you
and
imagine
how old were you and how old was she?
She was
18.
still 18. She was a few weeks before her 19th birthday.
And you were
And
19?
I was a few weeks after my 20th birthday.
This is a beautiful story. So your parents, of course, were both delighted, yes?
I don't think so.
No, I mean delighted that you actually were picking each other and not somebody else. No?
No, they were very much intent on my finding a well-gifted and positioned American girl.
Ah.
Okay. Just as much as they were very much intent on my sister finding a very well-positioned American man.
Which she did.
And did she do that?
Which she did. Which she did.
Who did she marry?
She married my brother-in-law Milton.
No, but first she married him, then he became your brother-in-law. What's his name? Milton what?
Freeman.
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 Yeah.
And where was he from? What city?
He was from Linden, New Jersey.
And he was well positioned.
Chemist.
He was an up-and-coming man. Yeah, he was a very successful chemist. Employed. You know, he was employed, and soon after he was married. About 3 years after he was married in '47, he and a partner decided to found a chemical business in this frontier town, Vancouver, Canada, and he became extremely successful there.
Mazel tov. So your parents were not so... and how about your parents? Did your parents not want you to marry him?
Well, they knew that no matter what they said, I would go ahead and do it, so they sort of agreed.
Who did they expect you to marry? What kind of person?
Well, anybody with money, anybody settled, you know. And,
Well, they wanted the best for you. They wanted you comfortable.
Well, money is not always the best.
Well, that's what their idea was. Yeah.
But they knew Leonard, they knew we would be happy together, and they'd known him for many years, and it was better than a stranger. So
what was the date of the wedding?
May
24th, 1944.
Maybe 65 years this
It'll
year.
be 65 years in a few months.
Mazel tov. That's wonderful.
Can you tell the story, Leonard, that you wrote about and you gave a talk at the synagogue about your experience in Europe? You gave an anecdote about capturing a German soldier and interrogating him, and a piece of paper you saw in his wallet.
I think what you're referring to is the fact that right after I was I gave first aid to our lead scout who was shot by a sniper. And on my way there too, the sniper shot at me too. He didn't fortunately hit me, but by shooting at me. He gave himself away and he was shot. At any rate, this 200-yard run in the line of fire earned me a Silver Star Medal for heroism on the fire. I can show you the medal over there. Nonetheless, after we rejoined the main troop on the main road, one of the experiences I saw there was one of our soldiers interrogating one of the captured German soldiers there and inspecting a wallet. And I recognized the wallet for what it was. After he inspected it, he was going to throw it away. I said, "Give me that." And he did. And the wallet, you know what European wallets are like? They are not small like this, but they are about this because they go into jacket pockets. I recognized it as the back of the parchment on which Torah that is used for Torah scroll writing. And indeed, when I opened it up, I saw that it was stitched together from a strip of a Torah scroll. I have it somewhere in the garage there.
Go find it.
And I saw that he had his Dienstbuch, his service booklet in there, and I saw where he had service. He had service in Alsace-Lorraine, and the picture of two young women testify from Alsace-Lorraine gave additional testimony to his service in Alsace-Lorraine. But he also served in the Ukraine and in Poland, and I imagine he must have witnessed the destruction of Jewish communities there, and possibly also the killing of Jews. And this strip of Torah scroll must have been a trophy for him, and he had some sort of woman stitch a wallet for him out of this. I let this wallet lie on a shelf above my desk for very many years. I remember it was about 26 years after that event that I took it down, emptied it, and took the stitches out and tried to see what it was. And it was the Parasha Ki Tisa. And I specifically remember how my tears welled up when I saw this passage there, Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. Do not boil, do not seethe a kid in the milk of its mother. And I knew that passage as the pre-conceptual, symbolic expression of elemental human compassion. That's why this moved me. That's why this moved me so when there's and to juxtapose this with the one who had absolutely no inkling what sort of treasure he had here and helped to destroy. This is what you wanted me to tell about.
Well, those are my grandparents.
Grandparents.
Yeah.
And the names are?
Charlotte and Jonas Schwartz. And she was born Schönhauser.
Okay, and here they are again.
Yes. My grandfather and my grandmother. And to the left is my father, and to the right is his youngest brother. My father's name was Ernst, and the brother's name was Leo.
And where are they here?
They are in their dining room
Where?
in Vienna.
What's the address?
51 Untere Donaustraße.
And you
Second
wanted me to
district.
look at this pillow here.
Which is the same pattern as the rug.
And we'll go look at the pattern just a second. And this is, tell me about this carpet.
Well, my grandmother made it, and it was finished sometime before World War One. She also made. She also did some type pictures that I have. I'm very happy that my mother brought these over with her.
Okay, let's go.
Then we have my grandmother and her husband, my grandfather. And next to my grandfather is his adoptive daughter. And in front is my uncle, who was, I think, probably 4 years at the time. Grandmother. I think this is the day she married her second husband, who was also a widower.
So these are the Schwartz children.
No, these are the Schwidtke's children. The children are from this man here. The two children. This is the little boy here, and this is my mother.
So these are, she had no children from her first marriage?
She only had, she had these two children from her first marriage, and here she's marrying her second husband.
Wait a second. These two children, whoops.
Are these man's children. He died when my mother was 2 years old. Okay? And the little boy, Bernard, was 7. They were 5 years apart. Okay? At this point, my mother was not born yet. Here, this is a number of years later, she is marrying her second husband, Leib Schwartz. She's marrying a Schwartz. And the time my mother was 8 and my uncle was 13.
Uh-huh. So how is your maiden name Schwartz?
Because my father's name was also Schwartz. My mother married a Schwartz. Schwartz was a popular name.
So your grandmother married a Schwartz and your mother married a Schwartz?
Yes, there you
Ah, okay. That resolves that.
I don't
piece.
like to smile because I was...
So this one is Leo,
Yeah.
your mother's brother,
This is my father's brother.
your father's brother,
Yeah.
and there's your grandmother,
Your grandfather.
and there's your grandfather.
They have paintings of themselves up here. You can barely see them.
Oh, and did those survive any place?
No.
No.
Nothing's around.
And there's your father.
Yeah.
And how about this one over here? What is this? Is this your family now?
This we
Oh.
this we had made in '93 because in '94 we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, and we managed to get all the family together for that. So in November, December of '93, we got them all. I think it was in the Thanksgiving time in '93 that we got them all together. For
Okay, let's close
picture.
up here.
Yeah,
So here's Leonard,
yeah.
and there's Edith,
And there's Carl behind us.
Carl, your son Carl, and your daughter
Yeah, Karen.
here,
This is Karen. Yeah.
and your
So-
daughter Karen. Wait a
this is our
second,
daughter.
Karen here,
Yeah.
and this is your daughter-in-law,
Yeah, Michael. Yeah.
Michal, and this is your son-in-law.
Howie, you know him. From
Yeah, and here are the three children from Howie and
Yeah.
Karen. One, who's this one?
Yona. This is Ailey. And this is Natan.
Okay.
And here we have, let's see.
Looks like twins here?
No, they're 2 years apart.
Oh,
One is Yossi and one is Jimmy. I can't tell. I think Yossi's over here and Jimmy's over there.
okay. And up here, what is this up here?
This is a sampler that my mother made.
This is wonderful.
She made that in school when she was about.
What was her
That's
first
what I-
name again?
Ernestine.
Ernestine
Yeah.
Schwittkes. Schwittkes.
Yeah, she never took my step grandfather's name. When it come to us, that they'd run over there and say, measure me, and they'd stretch their little necks, you know. If they grew a 1/4 inch, they'd be so happy. They always grew. We always told them they grew. No, they're all over.
You want to hear stories about these people or
First,
what?
let's hear the names.
Huh?
Who they are. That's enough for today.
This one here is my grandmother.
And her name is?
Her maiden name was Anna Mond,
M-O-N-D?
Yep.
or M-O-N-D,
Huh?
which is a German word for moon. She was born in Tarnów, but when she was very young, she moved, her family moved to Vienna. And
She's
when
quite
it came time to marry, wooing pictures were exchanged between Tarnów and Vienna. And this is my grandmother's wooing picture. She's about 17 or so years old, I would say. 18 at the very most. She's decked out in she has
All her finery.
long hair and all the finery, yes. You see, very nicely dressed. And this is the man she married. My grandfather,
And what's his name?
Menachem Mendel Ehrlich.
And in the middle?
In the middle is his father, my great-grandfather,
That's a wonderful picture.
the one who came across from Russian Poland to Galicia in order to escape the mandatory Tsarist drafting of Jewish youngsters.
I like the fact that they're all drinking beer.
Well, they're all drinking beer.
And the man on the left?
The man to the left is son number 2. He had 5 sons. This is son number 2, and this is son number 4. And you see which one is modern and which one is...
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay? My great-grandfather still wears a strammel.
Yeah. And what is his name?
Hermann.
Hermann.
Hermann Ehrlich. I don't know his Hebrew name.
And where is this picture taken, do you think?
In Tarnów.
And is this the one, which is the one who,
Careful.
one of them, I'm confused, which is the one who had the tavern?
That's her mother's side of
This is the father's side.
yeah.
This is the one who had the soap
This
factory?
is the father's side, yeah.
This is the soap factory man.
This is the soap factory man.
Yeah.
Got killed.
This man dealt with hair. Remember, women had to shave their heads, but they wore wigs.
So he made wigs?
He made wigs out of the best hair available, namely from women from Georgia.
Okay.
This is my grandfather, Fishgrund.
This is the one who had the tavern.
Yeah.
tavern and grocery
estate.
store and all sorts of rural business.
He doesn't have his head covered, right? He has no yarmulke back there, does he? Would he have worn a yarmulke?
Oh yes,
There's a yarmulke back there?
I doubt it. This was a passport. This was taken from a tiny passport. That's the grandmother. Yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Honey. That is Annie.
Annie.
Anna. Her maiden name was Huppert.
Huppert.
Yeah.
And this one I'm going to take down because there's too much reflection. So what's going on here?
That's that grandfather again, Fishka.
So this is the wedding, this is the father of the bride?
This is the father,
And who's the bride?
and the bride is his youngest daughter from his first wife.
Yeah. Is this his second wife here?
This is his second wife, the same woman that's over on the
Oh.
picture there.
Yeah. Hannah.
Okay. And here he is surrounded by all his daughters and sons.
Are these his daughters too?
These are the two oldest daughters. Naturally, she's very possessive about standing next to the father, you see. Mm-hmm. And this is the second oldest, so she takes her.
This one is a daughter? Do you know who all these people are?
Yes, I know who all the daughters are, yes. This one is the oldest one. She settled she in time settled in Lvov, Lemberg.
What's her name?
Her name is Berta. Okay, and this one is Lorcha, Eleonora, her name was. Let me point out who she is. You ever hear of Shlomo Avineri? Yeah, she's the grandmother of Shlomo Avineri. Okay, and this is the grandfather of Shlomo Avineri here. That's her husband. You see, that's in other words, one of the sons-in-law.
Who else do you want to point out here?
Okay, this 14-year-old girl is my mother.
I see it.
Yeah.
And this one here is younger, right?
Huh?
And this is the youngest?
This is the youngest one. She was 8 years old at that time. And she and my mother are the only ones who survived the Nazi times. My mother, because she escaped to America. This one here is because she survived 2 years with her little boy with the partisans, and then she survived the extermination camp of Majdanek.
With a boy.
With the
With
boy.
a boy.
Actually, not with a boy, but they got separated. They found each other again. It's a terrible story.
Or a wonderful story.
Yeah, yeah. But
So the boy is like your age?
he's
No, he's much younger. He's 12 years younger than I am. He's now 27, but he's now 72 years old.
Where is he?
Chicago.
Huh?
In Chicago?
Yeah.
He's in Chicago, yeah.
But he's still
Beautiful
inside
faces, and they're all gone.
there.
These, all these sisters of my mother are gone. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And do you know where this picture is taken?
Yes, of course.
Tell me.
At the house which my grandfather built. It says Willkommen,
Willkommen.
yeah, it's in misspelled German.
In misspelled German.
There should be 2 M's on there.
Yeah.